Imagine this. It's the roaring 1920s, and you're living a life that seems straight out of a glamorous dream. But behind the facade of stardom lies a marriage that feels more like a suffocating cage. You've been yearning for a taste of freedom, a chance to shine on your own terms. And just when you think you found your escape in the arms of a new lover, reality comes crashing down on you. Your new lover, the one who has promised you the world, turns out to be just another deceitful liar. The betrayal cuts deep and ignites a fire of rage and fury within you. You've been played for a fool. Your heart is shattered into pieces, and your dreams lay somewhere amongst them. Revenge becomes your sole obsession and the only thing driving you forward. And in that fit of fury, you reach for the one thing that represents power and control, the gun that lies innocently in your husband's dresser. And with this newfound power, you confront the man who dared to toy with your heart and your future. The air cracks with tension as you stand face to face with your betrayer. The weight of the gun is heavy in your hand. And in that moment, time stands still, and the line between right and wrong blurs into oblivion. What would you do? I mean, by all accounts, the decision you make could be criminal-ish. Hi, I'm Dev.
And I'm Cam.
And welcome back to season 2 of Criminalish, a true crime podcast where two best friends trade stories ranging from the wild and wacky to the downright messed up. So, as some of you can see, particularly if you're listening to us on YouTube right now as this episode premieres, Cam and I have made some changes to the podcast based on some feedback and some things that we think you guys will really enjoy. One of those changes is that there is now video with all of our podcast episodes. So now you can not only see the way Cam and I react to each other's stories, but you can also get additional photos and visual aids to assist you as we tell the stories. Please leave us a comment and let us know what you think of our new setup and how much you're looking forward to supporting Cam and I on season 2 of Criminalish. And if you're looking to dive even deeper into the captivating world that is true crime brought to you by the Criminalish podcast, please consider becoming a member of our newly released Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you'll have access to a treasure trove of bonus episodes, reactions from your host, early access to new releases, and so much more. So be sure to click the link in the description of wherever you're listening to today's episode if you're interested in supporting Cam and myself with the Criminalish podcast. We'll see y'all in Cell Block C. And the final announcement that comes with the releasing of season 2 is that Cam and I are going to give you all more episodes this season. Last season, we uploaded every other week, averaging about twice a month. And this time we have upped our production and we're going to be uploading 3 times a month. This will always be on Fridays at 10 a.m. and we will be skipping the second and fifth Friday of every month. So be sure to look out for them, and we appreciate you guys supporting us so that we can bring even more content to you guys, which is why it's super important to listen to our episodes, support us on Patreon, and just in general, make sure you leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening to the Criminalish podcast. So, welcome to the first real episode of season 2. We hope you enjoyed our last special episode, but today we're going to bring you guys a story that I personally find fascinating, and that is the real life murders that inspired a musical that took the world by storm. Chicago. So if you've gotten a chance to look at our new Patreon, you might have noticed that there's a bit of a theme going on with all of our tiers. But while Cam and I love the musical Chicago, we were talking a few months ago, and I learned that Cam didn't know the real life story behind the musical. Thus, for our official debut of season 2, I had to tell Cam and you all this truly fascinating story that inspired one of the longest running musicals in history. So before we get into this crazy story of art imitating life, what are you drinking tonight, friend?
I am drinking a rosé from the company Vanderpump.
Ooh.
Col de Point. That was my attempt at a French accent, because my take on French is that they just skip like every second letter when they're pronouncing words. It's a rosé from France, 2023. It is their signature blend. And yes, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I can't complain about anything here.
Great, great.
What are you drinking, friend?
I am back with a revised version of Old Faithful. So if anybody watches this podcast, I want you to pause right now and put in the comments what my favorite wine is. I drank it like 7 times last season. If you don't know, it's okay. But if you do know, you have the key to my heart.
Can I guess?
Sure.
Oh, I already seen it. I got it right there. It's Apothecary. Mm-hmm.
Actually, you're close. It's Apothic Cab. So we have a Cabernet today.
Oh, she switched it up today. Okay.
Yes, I switched it up. Tried a little something new. Real life, I bought it because the bottle was pretty. Like, look at that.
That is how I shop for wine.
Right. If your labels are ugly, I'm not buying your wine. I'm just gonna tell you straight up. Sorry. Yeah. But yes, so I have the Cabernet. She's really good. She's concentrated. She is 13.5%. As always, we love a high alcohol content wine on this household. So that's what I'll be drinking tonight. Cheers to us.
Cheers to season 2.
Cheers to season 2. Woo.
So yeah, like Dev said, I love the musical Chicago. I had a stint as a theater kid in college, so I got really into musicals then. But I never actually heard the story that inspired the musical. So I'm really excited and intrigued, a little scared to hear what actually happened in the story.
Yes, but I'm super excited to tell you because I couldn't believe that you didn't know the story behind it. Because I feel like the first time I watched Chicago, I was so engrossed in the history of it. And while Cam had her stint as a theater kid, I am just a nerd who loves behind the camera work. I spent a little bit of time working in special effects, and I really love behind the camera a lot more than in front of the camera. So I dug into the history of this musical because I was like, there's something here. Even if it's not real people, there's something here. And I just happened to find the story behind it. So before we get into this episode, I do have quite a few trigger warnings for you, as I know this is a musical episode, but these are going to be real people, real events, and real messed up things do happen to the individuals that we're going to be talking about today. So I want to extend trigger warnings for sexual assault, verbal and physical abuse, self-harm, and suicide, as well as alcoholism and potentially neglect. So please bear all of that in mind as you continue to listen to today's episode. So our story today takes place, obviously, in Chicago, Illinois. And we're going to take a step back in time to the vibrant yet tumultuous era of the 1920s. To the bustling streets of Chicago, the 1920s were known as the Jazz Age. The 1920s was a time of profound cultural change in the United States. Prohibition was in full swing, making it illegal to consume alcohol. So let's take a sip in honor of that no longer being the case.
True.
But like most things in the US, if the government takes it away, people will find a way to do it illegally. So while prohibition was enacted to, quote, protect individuals and families from the scourge of drunkenness, end quote, It is instead given rise to underground speakeasies and bootlegged operations. And not only were people rebelling against prohibition, but women were also rebelling against the social norms placed upon them for centuries. The dresses became shorter, tighter, more revealing, and young women began joining the workforce instead of becoming mothers. And the women of the time fully embraced the newfound freedoms that were available. Its bustling nightlife, thriving art scene, and reputation for corruption made Chicago a magnet for anyone seeking some excitement or some opportunity. But in the time of social prosperity, crime rates were out of control, and the city seemed to be run by the local gangsters, like Al Capone. Prostitution, gambling, and violence were running rampant, and the corruption amongst those in power was even worse. It's against this backdrop that the real-life murders that inspired Chicago took place. The juxtaposition of glamour and glitz, and of fame and of infamy, would serve as the perfect setting for the sensational tale that would captivate audiences for a generation to come. So, if for some strange reason you haven't seen the musical Chicago, number one, it's literally available for free on the internet. I will leave a link to it in the description so that you can go watch it. But since you're here listening on the Criminalish podcast, I'll give you a brief overview that won't spoil too much. So, as previously stated, the musical Chicago is set in the 1920s during the jazz era in Chicago, Illinois. It is there that we meet the main characters, Roxy Hart and Velma Kelly. Roxy Hart is a pretty blonde chorus girl who dreams of stardom and performing on the stage like her idol, Velma Kelly. Velma is a performer accused of an unspeakable double murder. But Roxy finds herself also accused of murdering her lover. And together, Roxy and Velma navigate the treacherous waters of the criminal justice system, while also vying for the attention of the public and the media, with the help of their slick lawyer, Billy Flynn. And each one of the characters I just mentioned is based on a real person. So we'll start with our blonde bombshell, Miss Roxy Hart, who is based on a woman named Beulah May Annan. Beulah was born Beulah May Sheriff on November 18th, 1899, to parents Mary and John R. Sheriff in Owensboro, Kentucky. We don't know much about her early childhood, but we do know she married her first husband, Perry Stevens, who was a newspaper linotype operator. But that marriage didn't last very long, and she was soon divorced. However, shortly after her divorce, she would meet a man named Albert Al Annan, who was a car mechanic. And the two of them started dating, moved to Chicago together, and they got married on March 29th, 1920. In Chicago, Albert found work as a mechanic at a garage, and Beulah worked as a bookkeeper at Tennant's Motel Laundry. It was at this laundromat that she met Harry Kalstad, a furniture salesman, and the two began having an affair pretty much immediately. However, this affair was riddled with violence and substance abuse, most specifically alcohol. But sources say that Beulah found this affair exciting, and especially in the bland marriage that she had with Albert. So while it seems like everything in the affair and the marriage is going just fine, all of that would change on April 3rd, 1924. And while we do not know exactly what happened on that day, according to Beulah, Harry brought over a bottle of wine for the two to drink. They both drank in excess and were quite drunk when the couple broke out into a heated argument. And according to Beulah, Harry was trying to attack her, and there was a gun on the bed. As they both reached for it, she got it first. And in order to defend herself, she shot Harry in the back as he was trying to run away. So I'm sure all that just sounds very, very familiar with the plot of Chicago, right?
Yep. What's the line? Nobody makes a fool out of me. Is that it?
That's the one. That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
We'll say my favorite in particular. Oh, I shot him and I'll shoot him again. And I do it again. But while that is the plot of Chicago, in the real story, this is either the second or third version of events told by Beulah. Initially, Beulah confessed to the murder and stated that she shot Harry because he was going to leave her. And she would change this story twice in order to say that it was self-defense. In addition to changing her story multiple times, forensic evidence is just not backing up what she is saying. For starters, her husband said that he left the gun in the dresser, so she would have had to have gone into the dresser to get the gun. He also said that it should have never been left on the bed in the first place. Secondly, Harry was shot in the back as he was standing by the door, attempting to grab his hat and his coat, which was halfway on when his body was found, which suggests that he was attempting to grab his belongings before leaving the married couple's home.
And I don't know about you, but if somebody got a gun to me, I'm not going to stop and get my stuff before I run out. I'm hitting the door and I'm going to think about that later.
Exactly. I will either get it back or I won't. And that's going to be all right. But probably worst of all is there is evidence that Beulah played a foxtrot record over and over again for about 4 hours as she sat drinking cocktails waiting for Harry to die. And once he was dead, she called her husband and told him that she had shot a man in self-defense because he was going to assault her. But it was apparently a neighbor who called 911 after Beulah had confessed to the neighbor that she had shot her lover. And once that neighbor called the police, of course, Beulah was promptly arrested.
What business did she have telling the neighbor? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't understand people who commit crimes and confess. I'm not going to lie to you. But
and confess to a rando on the street, too. It's not like you're even under interrogation.
Hello. Yeah, it's baffling. It is baffling. But it's not the most baffling part of this case. Because I've already kind of laid down the framework of what Chicago was like in the 1920s. But there was a deeper obsession amongst the greater community. And that obsession was with female killers. Specifically, pretty female killers. Many people could not fathom the idea that a woman, especially a pretty woman, would ever murder somebody unless it was for her own protection, where she was justified in some kind of way. And Beulah's story was no different. Beulah was a beautiful young woman in her early 20s at the time of the murder, and her arrest and subsequent trial became a media sensation, with newspaper headlines covering the story for the, quote, pretty murderess, end quote, and her alleged lover. And best believe, if Beulah ever farted in prison, everybody and their mama was going to know about it, because it was going to be in the paper the next day. Especially after she got one of the best lawyers that her husband's money could buy. And yes, you heard me correctly. Her husband, Albert, stood by her after the arrest, pulled all of his money out of his bank account, and got her the best lawyer he could afford, and sat right behind her during the trial after she shot and killed her lover in your house.
Also, Beulah is such a 1920s name.
It is. It is.
I just want to say that. And if your name is Beulah, I'm sorry.
How old are you, mama? If your name is Beulah, how old are you? Please leave a comment. I would like to know. So I'm sure you're wondering, well, who's the best lawyer money could afford in 1924? Well, that would be none other than William Scott Stewart and W.W. O'Brien, the real life lawyers for Beulah who inspired the character of William Billy Flynn in the musical. And by all accounts, the two had a very similar strategy to that of Billy, which was dramatic, and they very much used the media to get the public on Beulah's side. So going into Beulah's trial, the prosecutors had so much evidence against her, but she had something that somehow was more convincing than all the evidence combined. She was young, she was pretty, and since this is the 1920s, only men sat on her jury. Fun fact, women did not have the right to sit on federal juries until 1957. And it wasn't until 1973 that all 50 states passed similar legislation to allow women to sit on juries.
That's actually wild.
Right, because that really wasn't all that long ago.
Yeah. My parents were born before then, and my grandparents were born well before it was federally legal.
Yep. So the prosecution lays out all their evidence, some of which I have laid out for you. And when it's time for the defense to put up their case, Beulah takes the stand in her own defense. And on the stand, she says that she shot Harry because she was afraid for her life and that he was going to sexually assault her. She did not dispute that she shot Harry, only that she was justified in doing so. And shortly after, the case was handed off to the jury. They very quickly returned back with a not guilty verdict on all counts. And Beulah was acquitted of all charges on May 24th, 1924, less than 2 months after the murder.
I know Harry was turning in his grave.
I would be doing somersaults.
So what did the prosecutor's argument look like?
The prosecution was arguing that it was basically a fit of passion. She purposefully shot and murdered Harry, and that it was an intentional murder, versus the defense saying it was self-defense, which is a defense to capital murder. And you want to know the first thing that Beulah did with her newfound freedom after her acquittal?
What?
The day after she was acquitted on all of her charges, Beulah announced to the media, quote, "I have left my husband. He is too slow," end quote.
If I'm Albert, I'm sick. I mean, throwing up, holding my stomach, can't leave the house, sick. Because you tell me, you gonna look me in my eyeball, both of them, and tell me I just took out all of my savings to get you the best lawyers for your trial where you've been accused of murdering a man, not just any man, a man who was your lover, who you were cheating on me with.
In my house, in my bed where I pay bills?
Literally. Sick.
Disgusted. So, in 1927, after her divorce with Albert was finalized, she married a boxer by the name of Edward Harlib. But just 3 months into their marriage, she would file for divorce on the grounds that Edward was cruel to her. I don't have any more explanation as to what cruel means. That is what is reported. But in the divorce settlement, Beulah received $5,000, which is just shy of $90,000 in 2024 money. And after receiving her settlement, she would move on to start seeing a new man by the name of Abel Marcus. However, shortly after starting her new relationship with Abel, Beulah would contract tuberculosis and ultimately die as a result of the disease at just the age of 28 years old on May 10th, 1928. She was returned to her home state of Kentucky, where she is buried at the Mount Pleasant Cumberland Presbyterian Church Cemetery in Daviess County, Kentucky. And that is the end of the story of Miss Beulah.
She lived a full life. She had 4 marriages, right?
Yep. 4 marriages.
By the age of 28?
By 28.
And here I am, almost 26. 0. It was a different time back then because she got married to Albert when she was 19.
Yep.
And that was already her second marriage.
Yep.
So you've told me the story of who Roxy was based on. So who was Velma based on?
I'm so glad you asked, Cam. So Miss Velma Kelly was based on the real woman, Belva Eleanora Gardner. Belva was born Belva Eleanora Businger on September 14th, 1884, in Litchfield, Illinois, to parents Mary Jane and Charles M. Businger. Similarly to Beulah, we don't know much about Belva's childhood, but we do know that she was a 3-time divorcee cabinet singer, professionally known as Belle Brown. Her first marriage was to a man named Harry W. Peepo on July 11th of 1901. The two of them would divorce by 1905. She then went on to marry a second man who, by my research, I could only find reference as Mr. Overbeck, and I do not know how long they were married before they got divorced. And finally, in 1917, she married a man named William Gardner, who was 20 years older than her and a wealthy industrialist in Crown Point, Indiana. However, only 5 months into their marriage, William successfully had the marriage annulled after claiming that Belva's divorce from her second husband, Mr. Overbeck, had not yet been finalized. Oh, this one's going to really throw you for a loop, friend, because once the second divorce was finalized, William would go on to remarry Belva.
So was he just trying to make sure everything was done by the book, or?
I don't know, because they would divorce again by 1924.
Lord Jesus.
So, going into 1924, Belva had started seeing a married man by the name of Walter Law. And everything in the relationship seems to be going great. However, on March 11th, in 1924, Walter was found sprawled out in the front seat of Belva's car with a bottle of gin and a gun lying next to him. The police quickly tracked Belva to her apartment, where they found blood-soaked clothes on the floor. And when police questioned her about it, she confessed that she was drunk and she was driving with Walter, but due to the alcohol, she had completely blacked out and couldn't remember a thing. That should also sound very familiar. So Belva was arrested the morning of March 12th for the killing of Walter. And when she was questioned again by police, she also admitted that she and Walter went out drinking together at various bars and jazz houses, and she admitted that she was carrying a gun for fear of robbers. And similarly to Beulah, Belva's case was all over the media. You couldn't keep her name out of the papers. But while Beulah was in the media for being a pretty murderess, Belva's attention also added the age difference between her and Walter. Walter was 29, married with a child, while Belva was a 38-year-old, 3-time divorcee. And all the media could not get enough of this story because there was sex, there was alcohol, and there was murder.
I forgot this was during Prohibition, too. So it's not just that they were drinking and driving, but they were drinking.
That part. Belva would actually sit down to do several interviews with the media, which should also sound very familiar. In one interview that Belva did with Maureen Dallas Watkins, she said, quote, "No woman can love a man enough to kill him. They aren't worth it because there are always plenty more. Walter was just a kid, 29, and I'm 38. Why should I have worried whether he loved me or whether he left me? Gin and guns, either one is bad enough, but together, they get you in a Dickens of mess, don't they? End quote.
Not a Dickens.
A Dickens. And I'm not going to say she was spitting. However, comma. And we're going to leave that right there. So after the media has a field day with Belva's story and her confessions, Belva would go to trial in June of 1924. Within days of Beulah's trial, at the trial, one of Walter's coworkers testified that Walter had confided in him that Belva was a possessive lover who had threatened him with a knife when he tried to leave her. Walter allegedly also told his friend that he believed that Belva would kill him one day. Belva was also represented by William Scott Stewart. And if you'll remember, that's the same person who defended Beulah and inspired the character of Billy Flynn. And William presented a defense that we simply don't know what happened, and that it's possible that Walter may have killed himself with the gun, and that even if Belva did kill Walter, she was too intoxicated to have committed the murder intentionally, which is a defense. As Belva had previously stated, she did not remember anything, and she completely blacked out. Thus, she did not take the stand in her case. And in early June of 1924, Belva was found not guilty and acquitted of all charges. However, in her case, it is believed that she was acquitted due to genuinely the police not having enough evidence that directly connected her to the crime. In 1925, following her acquittal, Belva would remarry William Gartner for the third time. And for a third time, he would file for divorce in 1926.
Did this man not learn?
Of course
from
not.
The prior 2 times he was married to this woman?
She's different now. She's changed. People can change, Cam.
So William was 20 years older than her. So she was cheating on and killed a man half his age, and he still took her back.
That part of the math doesn't quite math, but the first part of the math was mathing for sure. Look, my granddaddy used to say that love is but a splendor thing.
It must be. It must be.
And it don't make no sense. So again, William files for divorce in 1926 on the grounds that Beulah is abusive and an alcoholic.
If I was the court, I would have been like, man, what do you want us to do? Because you about to run back to her again. Because it's one thing to go back to her. It's another thing to get married to her again.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. Who knows? Maybe Belva's just like Sharon and she got the good, you know?
That's what I was about to say. Because it ain't no way. Lord Jesus.
There's definitely a way, Cam. There's definitely a way.
You're right. You're right.
So, on July 5th of 1926, William finds Belva in bed with another man. And according to him, she threatened to murder him when he was, in my opinion, appropriately pissed that she was cheating on him again.
She was mad that he was mad that she was cheating.
How dare you?
Not only cheating, walked in on her cheating.
How dare you interrupt my alone time with my lover? How dare you?
She literally said, "You're scaring the hoes. What are you doing?"
My brother in Christ. My partner in Christ. That's even worse.
Literally.
However, for reasons I do not know, the couple did not separate. And they actually moved to Europe together in 1930.
And he thought Chicago was bad. I hope they didn't move to Paris because they were very free over there.
I do not know specifically where they moved, but I do know, by all accounts, the couple lived a happy, toxic marriage until William's death on December 2nd in 1948. Upon William's death, Belva moved to Pasadena, California, and lived with her sister, Ethel, where she reportedly lived out the rest of her days until dying of natural causes on May 14th, 1965, at the age of 80. Another date that wasn't all that long ago.
Was not that long ago. That was a year before my parents were born.
Crazy. So I'm sure you're wondering, okay, we have all the people who seemingly inspired the musical that took the world by storm. But how do we get there? Well, if you remember, there was a journalist named Maureen Dallas Watkins, and she reported on the trials of Beulah and Belva for the Chicago Tribune. And since the trials captivated the public and the press, as both of these women were dubbed pretty murderesses, newspapers seized the opportunity to sensationalize the details of the crimes. But Maureen took it one step further. In 1926, Maureen drew inspiration from the courtroom drama and the larger-than-life characters that she saw and transformed her experience into a play simply titled Chicago, which premiered on Broadway in 1926 in Chicago, Illinois. It is rumored that Belva attended the debut of Chicago, but I was only able to find that from one source.
I was about to say 1926. She was quick with it.
Absolutely.
She ain't wasting no time.
None whatsoever. And I'm not mad about it. Get your coin, sis. Everybody else is doing it.
Exactly.
So the play received mixed reviews and enjoyed a brief run on Broadway. However, the themes of crime, celebrity, and corruption resonated with audiences and laid the groundwork for future adaptations. What followed was a 1927 silent film, a 1975 stage musical, a 1997 revival, and finally, the 2002 movie musical that won an Academy Award for Best Picture, all titled simply Chicago. Despite all the success that Chicago had, Maureen later regretted glamorizing the story of these two women and almost invalidating their victims. And that, quote, over the years, she became disturbed that she had assisted in getting an acquittal for a murderer, end quote. She felt as both of these women were guilty and they deserved to go to jail because they both showed no remorse for what they had done.
So I know the play came out in 1926. So did the play actually impact the decision of the jury? I guess it would have been Belva's trial since Beulah's trial was already done by that time, right?
Well, actually, both of their trials were already done because the play comes out in 1926. They are both found not guilty in 1924. So Maureen's struggle was she reported for the Chicago Tribune. So she was one of the people who reported on the pretty murderess. And, she can't be this evil murderer because she sat down with me for this interview and gave this statement. And she published their statements and kind of gave them a voice to the public. Mm-hmm. And she felt guilty about that later in life.
Okay, got it.
So as the years went on and the popularity of Chicago began to die down, she would retire and move to Florida to live out the rest of her days. However, in the early 1960s, choreographer Bob Fosse approached Maureen for the rights to Chicago for a musical adaptation. He saw her work as an opportunity to grow and adapt into a musical, and she refused, again due to her belief that she had aided two murderers in getting an acquittal. However, in 1969, Maureen would sadly pass away of lung cancer, and shortly after her death, Bob would negotiate and purchase the rights to her play and would move on to produce Chicago, the musical, premiering on Broadway in 1975. A revival followed in 1997 and would ultimately be filmed in 2002. Today, Chicago remains one of Broadway's longest running and most beloved musicals, captivating audiences around the world with its timeless themes, unforgettable characters, and electrifying performances. It encapsulates the pursuit of fame, the corruption of power, and the lengths people will go to in order to get what they want. These themes are as relevant today as they were in 1920, making Chicago a story that transcends time and place. Chicago is more than a musical. It's a commentary on the cult of celebrity, the corruption of the justice system, and the blurred lines between reality and illusion. It's a reminder that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and that even the most outrageous stories might be more true than we know. And that is the end of our story, friend.
Wow. I mean, I definitely did not know all of the background here. Like, I really like the musical soundtrack. I actually have not seen the movie. I've just listened to the musical soundtrack like again and again. And yeah, I did not know that there was this history behind it. I think it's so wild that not only were female killers such a huge point of focus for people during that time, but there was also this disbelief associated with it. There was this infantilization of women that occurred along with it, where it's like, oh, wow, a woman accused of murder. But when you get to actually charging them, specifically white women, it's no, they're actually too innocent to do anything like that. So any excuse that they give must be the truth. Because the fact that a woman, a white woman, an innocent white woman in their eyes, could purposefully kill someone, purposefully take someone's life was just unimaginable to these all male juries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you've said it on the podcast before, but the cognitive dissonance was way too much. And it could not be passed. And it's one of the things I find so fascinating that is so well highlighted, not only in this case, but in this play, about how pretty privilege is a thing. Hate to be that person, but if you're pretty enough, you can get away with murder. I've also just been diving into like the psychology of how we view people and everything, just as a way to kind of check my own biases as I go through life. But statistically, you are more likely to believe somebody that you find attractive. You are. That's actually how a lot of like manipulators and narcissists get in, is because you find them attractive. So you're more likely to believe their BS. And if you do catch them in a lie, you give them the excuse of like, oh, well, you know, they were just doing blah, 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 blah. They wouldn't actually try to hurt me. That's the excuse that you give them over and over again. And it's so fascinating to see that play out in our justice system and have it be the truth. There were a lot of cases where pretty women got to move on with their lives because they were pretty, because nobody could believe that a pretty woman could do something so heinous. Fascinating.
Very.
I will say one thing that I actually just found out, the part about the writer of the play not wanting to agree to the musical. I found that out during my research. And honestly, it does make me look at the whole production very differently, because she didn't want this. And you kind of went behind her back and waited till she died to take it from her. And it really makes me look at the whole production a little more differently, of like, dang, this is not what this woman wanted at all. And that's sad.
Yeah, and I get her disappointment. I get her fear, because one thing that I struggle with as a consumer of true crime is that sometimes it's not done well. Like, for instance, the Dahmer show on Netflix.
I never even watched it because I was like, I refuse to give this airtime. I refuse. I saw the clips on Twitter and I was like, I refuse to add to this. I refuse.
Yeah. Because the worst part about it is it looked like a great show. So much so that you can forget the fact that this happened to real people. And I think what's even worse than that is the fact that the families of the victims were not given anything.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
If the show was made and the proceeds from the show were going to the families of the victims, I might have reconsidered watching it. I still might not have watched it just because I think that over dramatization of real life true crime is just icky.
Agreed.
And especially when it's overly focused on the killer.
Agreed.
That to me is just icky. And the worst part about it is it seemed like a great show. But I almost like it when like I'm watching like Investigation Discovery and the dramatization is so bad that I know that it's not real, because it allows me to not get lost in the fact that this happened to a real life person.
I completely agree. And I honestly feel like that's why, even in our cases, me and Cam always lead with the victim. We always lead with telling you a lot about their life and who they are and try to give them a voice, because that's what I care about. I don't care about who took them off of this earth. I care about who they were when they were here. And that's why I just can't get behind the dramatization of shows. It's different if you do a documentary. It's different if you sit down with families of victims and they do interviews and they are compensated and they want to be involved. That's completely different, especially when you reenact this woman's breakdown in court like she wasn't, like that wasn't the most traumatizing experience of her entire life. And I feel like when you try to reenact that, we have lost the plot. Somewhere along we have lost the plot, because I don't know how you look at that and you're like, okay, cool. Let me get in a state where I need to act this out. Like I cried. Like I wanted to he cried when I saw this woman screaming at him. Not because I knew what she was going through, but because I couldn't imagine what she was going through.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about, but it's definitely made me look at the production completely different. When the person who is kind of credited with bringing this to the world never wanted it brought to the world, at least in a musical format.
Hello, everyone. As we announced on Instagram and TikTok, we are here to announce the winner of the giveaway that we hosted on Instagram to kick off season 2. So if you did not see this giveaway, basically we posted on Instagram and TikTok that we will be doing a giveaway where the only requirements to enter the giveaway were to follow us on Instagram, like our giveaway post, and comment a suggestion for a case that we should cover in season 2. So without further ado, I will choose and announce the winner of our giveaway. So basically, I just put everyone's names into a random generator app, and that's how I'll be choosing. No bias anywhere at all here. And we have a winner at Shayna.Lofton. You won $50 from our giveaway. We look forward to doing more of these in the future. So definitely let us know if you want to see more of that. Thank you to everyone who participated.
Thanks, everyone. Any other thoughts, friend?
Nope, that's all I've got.
Thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode. And thank you so much for sticking around for season 2. I'd like to thank Chicagology and Medium for providing most of the material for this episode. And if you'd like to check out photos related to this case, be sure to follow us at Criminalish Podcast on Instagram and TikTok.
Listeners, you can also find us on YouTube at Criminalish Podcast. And if you like what you hear, be sure to leave a thumbs up or a 5-star review, depending on where you're listening or watching us. And if you are listening on Spotify, feel free to leave any comments or questions in the Q&A portion. As always, stay nosy, my friends, and we look forward to bringing you more stories in season 2. Bye.
Bye.